Picture hanging down by a rope, thousands of feet above the earth, with nothing but a fraying rope and your sibling's life slipping through your fingers. That's exactly the nightmare our protagonist faces in this mountain climbing thriller, where one split-second decision turns a family tragedy into the start of a desperate rescue mission on the world's deadliest peak. What begins as a routine ascent quickly spirals into a fight against nature, time, and guilt as one climber risks everything to save the people he loves. Stick around till the end to see how this sacrifice becomes the spark behind one of the most daring rescues ever attempted. On a clear, bright day, a group of mountaineers attempt to climb a mountain, amongst whom are Annie, Peter, and their father, Mr. Garrett. The climb starts with no problem, and along the way, Peter pauses to take a picture of a hawk hovering above and across the mountain peaks. Their father checks on them to make sure their camming device is properly fixed before the trio continues on their ascent, with their father leading the way, with Peter following and Annie a bit behind Peter. Before they can move forward on their climb, disaster strikes. One of the climbers above them, an amateur as mentioned by Peter, loses his bag alongside the climbing ropes. This event leads to the cam on one of the climbers coming loose, sending him down. He collides with another climber and, upon pulling away from the mountain, they bring the trio of Annie, Peter, and their dad along with them. The 5 climbers hang on, with all their weight being supported by Annie's cam. With the weight being too much for the cam, one of them comes loose from the wall. The siblings' dad asks for calm and tells them all to stop moving around. With the final cam slowly coming loose off the mountain wall, and in the midst of all the moving around, the 2 climbers below Annie and Peter's father get loose, and plummet to their miserable deaths. Having less weight on the harness, Annie's father asks her to try to reach the wall to see if she can anchor them in again. Seeing the difficulty her daughter is facing and with the cam moving further out of the mountain, he asks Peter to get his knife and make the difficult decision of cutting him loose, as there is too much weight, and one cam isn't going to hold them. His children are reluctant to go through with the decision, but he insists that it is the only way. Peter cuts the rope, saving both Annie and himself, while sending their dad to his tragic end. 3 years later, in the lower Himalaya, Pakistan, Peter Garrett, who works with National Geographic, is seen taking pictures of wildlife, before leaving with his partner back to base camp. On their way back, Peter's partner stumbles, hits his head on a rock, and tumbles down on their descent. He wedges his foot between 2 rocks and screams out in agony. Peter rushes to his aid, help arrives, and they are flown on a chopper to Siachen Glacier, where a doctor is waiting to attend to Peter's partner. Aboard the chopper, Peter is told of his sister's arrival at K2 base camp the previous week. At the base, Peter meets with a colonel, who tells him that the National Geographic is always welcome in Pakistan, as they are the only Westerners who come to Pakistan without wanting to conquer something. Soon, Peter and the pilot fly to K2 base camp after dropping off his injured partner. On their way back, Peter asks his sister, wanting to know if she will be with Elliot Vaughn, a wealthy man who wants to attempt to summit the K2 mountain. Peter is told that Annie is leading a WNN documentary crew and that they will be going up the mountain with Vaughn. When they arrive at K2 base camp, Peter meets with his sister, who isn't too pleased to see him. Peter congratulates his sister on her WNN job. She replies by wittily telling him that they needed someone who could climb K2 and look presentable. Peter and Annie catch up and have small talk before Peter asks her about her departure, to which Annie replies that they will be leaving for the climb the next morning. Elliot Vaughn arrives at K2 base camp in his chopper called Majestic. He greets both Tommy McLaren, a professional climber, and Annie, with whom he would be summiting the K2. Elliot Vaughn excuses himself from Annie after spotting Ed Viesters, a man who has climbed Mount Everest on 5 different occasions, and goes to greet him. Later on, Peter goes looking for a man called Skip. They chat for a bit, and he tells him that Vaughn has a publicity stunt for his new airline called Majestic Air, which makes summiting the mountain important and urgent to him. Skip assures Peter that Annie is in good hands, as no one knows the hills better than Tommy McLaren. Soon, the French-Canadian Monique comes to where they are, and Skip introduces her to Peter as their base camp manager and medic. Monique replies, telling Skip that they have met, as Peter had mistakenly walked into her tent when looking for Skip. A party is thrown the night before the challenge begins, which sees Vaughn welcome everyone to the highest party in the world, literally speaking. He lets them know that he attempted to climb the mountain 4 years back, an attempt which ended in a tragedy, and that with the help of Tom McLaren, he intends to fulfill the dream 2 days from that time. Vaughn makes mention of the inaugural flight of Majestic Air flying over the summit around the same time, when he would have reached the summit to wave them on. He wishes every other team climbing the mountain good luck, and the party continues. A man in the crowd, Montgomery Wick, not swayed by Vaughn's words, asks him about the weather conditions and if it is safe for climbing. Vaughn responds to him, letting him know that they have done their analysis and that the present moment is the best time to climb. Vaughn adds that Tom McLaren is the leader of the mission, whose decisions would be paramount to everyone's safety above. In the distance, shots are fired, and Vaughn cheekily states that the Pakistanis agree with him as they give a 21-gun salute. Back in his tent, Montgomery Wick shaves off his beard before packing his things and leaving on a journey up the mountain. In Annie's tent, Peter asks her if she remembers Montgomery, the man asking questions, whom their dad used to talk about as they were in the service together. Peter, seeing Annie being cold to him, tells her that he misses their father and that she shouldn't hold him responsible for his death because he chose to follow their father's instruction of cutting the rope to save their lives. Annie doesn't want to talk about it, but later gives in and debates it, telling Peter that he didn't give it a chance. Peter tells Annie that he did what he thought was right, but Annie rebuffs him and asks him why he never climbed again after the incident, or visited their father's grave, if he thought he did what was right. Annie lets Peter know that she is climbing the mountain the next day because of their father, as she feels closer to him when she is up there. After hearing this, Peter wishes his sister all the best up on the mountain. The next day, Peter watches on as his sister departs on a dangerous mission to the summit of K2. Peter notices a spin drift coming off the top of the mountain, which worries him, but Skip assures him that it is nothing serious, and Annie would be just fine. Annie, Vaughn, and Tom begin their ascent without too much of an issue, but not too long. Tom also notices what Peter had earlier seen and tells Vaughn about it. Annie and Vaughn manage to convince Tom that they should keep going and not turn back. Back at the base, Peter gets into the helicopter and prepares to leave, before looking up and seeing a big cause for concern. He gets down immediately and goes into the command tent, where all things are being monitored. Peter asks if Tom McLaren is pulling them back, but is met with a negative response that they have chosen to continue their ascent. Peter realizes the danger his sister is in and radios to Tom McLaren, telling him of the danger they face. Skip takes the radio from Peter and confirms Peter's claims about a storm heading their way to Tom. Tom looks towards Vaughn and tells him that he is pulling the plug and that they should start heading down, back to base. Vaughn, being adamant not to turn back as he is hell-bent on completing the mission, doesn't listen to Tom and continues the ascent. Tom follows Vaughn and Annie for a bit before concluding that it is absolutely suicide. He turns back and tells Elliot Vaughn that they do not have a choice and have to turn back. At this point, Vaughn realizes it is true and succumbs. They start to head back when, suddenly, the floor cracks open beneath Annie, and she plunges downward into a cave. Vaughn calls out to her, and Annie lets him know that she is safe. Right then, an avalanche hits, but Vaughn and Tom get to safety as they fall through the gaping hole that Annie had earlier fallen through. Back at the K2 base camp, Peter races into the command center and tries to reach Annie on the radio. When Annie comes around, she goes towards Tom's side, who gets injured from the fall through the hole above them. Vaughn tries to reach base camp over the radio, but to no avail. At the base camp, Skip also tries to reach out to them but gets nothing in return. Peter sits in a chair, dejected, and suddenly, upon hearing static feedback, an idea comes to him. He picks up the radio and starts clicking on it in Morse code to try to reach Annie. Annie hears the feedback coming through their radio and stands to collect it from Vaughn. Tom makes it known that it is Morse code, and Annie tells them that their dad taught them when they were kids, and that it could save their lives if they got lost. After communicating with each other, and knowing that they are alive, Peter meets with the crew at base camp to devise a rescue plan to bring all three back from the mountain. Everyone keeps mute as they do not want to risk their lives to bring three people back. Peter storms out, with Skip following behind. He lays everything out to Peter and lets him know that his sister, as well as Vaughn and Tom, have 36 hours to be rescued before they die. Tom, Skip, and the pilot who flew with Peter to the base camp go to the Pakistani colonel to seek assistance. A crate of nitroglycerin cans is opened before them. The colonel makes it clear that his responsibility ends there, and that the decision is strictly Peter's, as they, the Pakistani army, have nothing to do with it. The colonel wishes them good luck and makes a move to head out before the pilot shouts for them to stop and that Skip shouldn't move an inch. The pilot sees nitroglycerin, which can easily combust and explode, leaking and flowing around Skip's feet. The pilot carefully loosens the laces on Skip's shoe to free his leg before carefully taking the shoe outside and tossing it far away from them. As soon as it lands afar off, it explodes. A close call for them. Back at base camp, Peter tells the camp about his plans and seeks out volunteers to come with him. After a period of time, Peter gets 3 people, alongside himself and Skip, who would go on the rescue mission, while being short of 1 person for the plan to be complete, as they need to be in pairs, with each team having a can of nitroglycerin. Up the mountain or well, inside it, as is the case, Tom's condition continues to deteriorate. Annie tells Tom about the latest development from Peter, whom she has been communicating with in Morse code. Tom asks Annie how Peter is going to locate them, as it is as good as them being on Mars. Elliot Vaughn chips in and makes it known that it is not a question of how, but how long it will take for them to be found. Vaughn tells Annie and Tom that it is time that will kill them, and that they need to lay down a schedule of how they will do things, and ration what they have to stay alive long enough. Vaughn informs Annie that she needs to relay their last known position over Morse code back to base camp, as this will help to narrow down the search. Peter receives Annie's message and talks to Skip about it. It soon dawns on them that they wouldn't be able to make it in time, and would need the help of Montgomery Wick if they were to embark on the mission. The team of 5 set out and headed towards the chopper, which would take them to Montgomery Wick before taking them as high as 21,000 feet, leaving them to continue their ascent from there. In the chopper, the team is surprised to meet Monique waiting for them there. Finally, they have 6 people and fly out towards Montgomery Wick. When they get to Wick and tell him about their rescue plans, he refuses, telling them he is not interested. But when Skip makes mention of Vaughn, he takes an interest and agrees to go with them if Skip returns to base to coordinate, as he doesn't trust leaving things to Vaughn's people. Wick splits the group into pairs, a weak and a strong climber, gives them instructions, and soon after they take off. At 21,000 feet, the limit at which the chopper can take them, the team experienced a little difficulty in getting off as the chopper became unstable due to how high it had ascended. They successfully get off and begin their ascent towards Annie, Vaughn, and Tom, whose time is running short. Elsewhere up the mountain, Vaughn watches on as Annie tends to Tom, whose condition continues to deteriorate. She makes a move to give Tom Dex, but Vaughn objects, telling her that they need to stick to the schedule they had set earlier, as their water will run out in 9 hours, making the Dex a much-needed lifesaver. Vaughn tells Annie bluntly that Tom will die there regardless, making her see why it is unwise to waste resources on him. Annie tells Vaughn to go tell it to Tom himself. Vaughn does just that and tries to make Tom realize that even if the rescue party gets to them in time, they would not be able to carry him down from the altitude they were at. Back to the rescue party, who set out on a mission of madness, Skip radios in and tells Wick that they have clear skies and winds for 2 days, before asking for their current position. Wick and Peter have a little altercation about Vaughn, as Peter wants to know why Wick is so interested in him. He lets Peter know that it is not his concern. They have a little moment about Peter's father, whom Vaughn knew. Vaughn tells Peter that he did the right thing, cutting the rope, and that it is what his father would have done if he were holding the knife. Soon enough, they continue with their ascent, with the other 2 teams doing likewise at different locations. Montgomery Wick radios into the summit team, and Vaughn responds to him during their conversation. Vaughn makes it known to Wick that Annie has edema, in hopes that it will help speed Peter up in making it to them. Wick withholds the information from Peter after speaking with Vaughn. Tom makes it known that Annie would be in need of Dex to sustain her with her present edema condition, but Elliot Vaughn replies to him, letting Tom know that Annie would have to wait as they have a schedule. Tom is pissed at Vaughn for his attitude towards the situation and tells him that they wouldn't be down there if it weren't for him. Annie gets up and confronts Vaughn before telling him to go get the backpack they saw earlier, which they hope contains the necessary things to survive longer. Vaughn does not respond as he doesn't have the cojones to go get it. Elsewhere, tragedy is about to strike. The pair of Monique and Cyril are on their ascent when Cyril stops for a bit to drink water, placing his backpack down. The backpack soon slides down, and he with it. Cyril makes multiple attempts to stop his descent with his ice axe, but to no avail, and just when he is about to topple off the cliff, the axe holds, and he hangs on. Annie of the summit team attempts to cross the gap between where they were and the backpack. Monique quickly comes towards Cyril to try to rescue him. Monique successfully latches a rope onto Cyril's axe. Doing so makes the ice beneath them give way, and they both hang off Monique's axe. Monique tells Cyril that she is going to swing him to his left, in an attempt to make him grab the rock. Deep within the mountain, Annie successfully gets the backpack and heads back towards Vaughn. Cyril grabs a hold of the rock, and as soon as he does, the nitroglycerin in his backpack falls out, heading straight to the ground where it is sure to detonate. Seeing this, Cyril quickly makes his way to the top, with Monique still hanging off her axe. She slips, but gets a hold of herself and attaches to the wall of the mountain. Soon, a big explosion erupts beneath them, which shakes the whole mountain. After the calm, Cyril tosses a rope down to Monique, for her to use to get back up, but stops in his tracks after. Monique's eyes also widen as she understands what is happening. Cyril looks behind him and sees a big wave, an aftermath of the explosion, rushing towards him. Cyril doesn't react in time, and the wave sweeps him off the mountain, sending him towards his icy end and leaving Monique all alone to get herself back up the mountain. Peter tells Wick that he is going to head towards Monique and Cyril, as they could still be alive. At this moment, Wick reveals to Peter what he hasn't told him about his sister's condition in an attempt to persuade him from heading towards Monique, as his sister has limited time. Monique, left all by herself, uses one of her cams to latch onto the rock to bring herself closer to the rope that Cyril tossed down before being swept away. She grabs onto the rope and gets herself back to safety. Within the mountains, Annie finds supplies in the backpack she went to fetch, which includes more decks. She goes towards Tom and gives it to him, and also injects it into her arm. Far off, Peter sees Monique trotting towards him. When she gets to him, Peter realizes that one of the fingers has been dislocated. They have small talk, and in the midst of the distraction, Peter snaps her fingers back in place. Elsewhere at the Pakistani base, the colonel is thrown off several feet back as the nitroglycerin in the next building explodes. Understanding what had just happened, the colonel radios the command center to inform them of a disturbing fact. Quickly, Skip is informed that the nitroglycerin reacts to the sun and that they need to hide it immediately as the sun is out. Skip tells Peter, and they do so immediately. Peter tries to reach the other team over the radio, but to no avail. He then sets out to where they might see him and shouts to them. Kareem, upon seeing Peter, turns on his radio and hears the information he has to pass across. They quickly hid the backpack from the sun, but it had already started leaking. The nitroglycerin, away from direct sunlight, starts to trickle into the sun. Just when they both thought they were safe and Peter had turned back to return to Monique and Skip, an explosion erupts, killing the duo in an instant. The aftermath of the explosion brings down a lot of ice, and with it, the revealing of Montgomery Wick's wife's body, which he has been looking for a very long time. Wick kisses her forehead. Peter, being behind him, talks to him and soon realizes why Wick had decided to come on the mission with them. Peter realizes that Wick has intentions to kill Vaughn as he was responsible for the death of his wife by taking away her decks, which was crucial to her survival 4 years back when Vaughn first attempted to summit the mountain, and using it for himself. Peter tells Wick he would not allow him to kill Vaughn. Wick replies to Peter, telling him that he can try to stop him, and walks away from him. Annie, one of the 3 members of the summit team, picks up her radio and reaches out to Peter. She informs her brother that she has limited time, less time than it would take for him to reach her, and tells him to turn back, aborting the attempt to rescue her, as she doesn't want him to die. Annie pleads with him not to risk it, tells him goodnight, and turns off her radio. While Annie sleeps, Vaughn injects himself with Dex to stay alive long enough. After doing so, he moves towards Tom and kills him by stabbing him in the chest with a syringe. In the next scene, Wick realizes that Peter and Monique are nowhere to be found as they have left him behind. Back within the mountain, when Annie wakes up and finds Vaughn trying to pave a clearing above, which would help Peter locate them. Annie realizes that Tom isn't moving anymore and goes to him. She realizes that he is dead, sees the syringe beside him, and she immediately knows that Vaughn had killed him. She wrestles with Vaughn till some ice comes crashing down on them at the site Vaughn had been digging at, creating a way to the top. Elsewhere, Peter and Monique continue their ascent, leaving Wick behind after finding out his intentions. They make it towards what seems like a dead end before Peter audaciously runs and leaps between 2 mountain peaks and latches on with his ice axe. Vaughn comes up with a twisted idea, goes towards Tom, and drains him of his blood as they need to send a signal through the opening that has been created above for easy location. After draining Tom, Annie and Vaughn push a bag filled with Tom's blood, alongside an emergency flare, to the top, where it explodes, painting the ice red with Tom's blood. Soon enough, Peter reaches Annie, blows a whistle, and sends a paper attached to a whistle with the word bang written on it, down to Annie. Annie and Vaughn take shelter in anticipation of a blast. Peter pours the nitroglycerin with him, into the ice, and sets a detonator beside it, before taking shelter with Monique behind a rock. After the explosion, Peter rushes towards the edge of the opening, and calls out to Annie. When Peter sees that his sister is alive, he tosses a rope down towards them. Vaughn straps Annie in before Peter and Monique attempt to pull her upward to safety. As they pull Annie, ice gives way above, sending Annie back into the gap. This event also results in the axe they anchored into the ice slowly coming loose. Just before the axe comes flying out of the ice, Wick arrives and stamps his foot on it. He takes the rope from Peter and lowers Annie back into the mountain. Wick also descends into the mountain, and he comes face to face with Vaughn. Vaughn, realizing what Wick is there for, tries to strike Wick with an axe, but Wick overpowers him. Wick has a change of heart and straps Vaughn in, as they all plan on getting out of the mountain. Peter and Monique make another attempt to pull Annie to safety, but her leg gets stuck in the ice. Wick, in an attempt to free her, ends up collapsing some ice above, which results in the thin layer of ice he and Vaughn are standing on collapsing. This instantly pulls Peter into the mountain gap as well. Vaughn, Wick, Annie, and Peter all hang in the air, exerting too much weight on the rope. Wick, having no choice, cuts the rope above him with a knife to free some of the weight and get Peter and his sister to safety. This instantly results in him and Vaughn falling through the mountain to their deaths. Back at the K2 base camp, Peter walks into the tent where Monique tends to Annie. She walks up to him and tells him that Annie is doing fine. Before Peter can go to see his sister, Monique plants a kiss on his lips, before stepping outside the tent, leaving Peter alone with his sister. Annie tells Peter that their father would be proud of him for what he did up the mountain. He kisses her on the forehead and tells her to get some sleep. Outside, Peter looks at where the fallen heroes are remembered in the base camp for a little while before walking away. In the end, it wasn't just about surviving, but bringing back the bond that existed between the siblings. Every human has an inherent desire to survive, but did Elliot Vaughn overdo it with his survival by any means strategy, which ended up costing him his life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, guys. Peace out.